Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
I was just looking to see. Okay. Look like we are on. Close the door. Get the door closed over here, please. Thank you very much. This is community television, so we can be a little laxy here. But in all due respect, we're going to have quite a show today. As you know, this is sort of like a Veterans Day weekend, so to speak. Now, I'm a Vietnam vet, and sometimes I tend to forget a bit about where I've been.
Naughty you.
Oh, gee whiz, I'm very little. Well, anyway, what we're going to do this time around is just sort of honor the fact that there's the veterans. Just going to talk about veterans across the board, and I've got some very notable figures here with me today, and know both of these individuals for quite some time. I've got Doug Bomarito, and Doug and I, at one point in time, we were recruiters together.
That's right.
Back in those days with Answer Haggerty and
That's
Judd
right.
Blakely, and those guys were back in those days. You might remember those days. In fact, Answer and I is retired, and we got
Judd's never retiring, but fortunately for us, he's in Mobile.
That's right. And then I've got Art Robinson. You've seen Art on the show many times. He's the educator of the group, so to speak, the historian from that standpoint aspect of it. But he wasn't a military person. But the fact of the matter is, he's the lay person. He's been very active in a number of other things that have been sort of closely related to military in many, many ways and whatever. So what we're going to do, again, like I said, that's what we're going to be doing this particular hour. And hopefully you've got some activities that you're going to be reaching out to vets during this particular period. And all kinds of things. You know, you can eat anywhere you want to nowadays, and you can, especially everybody's interested in the food. But you can do that. You can go and visit the Oregon Historical Society. They've got a couple of exhibits out there. I've got some very interesting exhibits out there. And in this particular exhibit that they got there right now is one talking about African Americans and their participation, and talked about the history of that whole aspect of it. I always keep up the idea that the thing that I always tend to identify with most often was President Lincoln. President Lincoln was the one that basically integrated the military. A lot of times that history doesn't come out. It says Truman did it, but it was President Lincoln. But anyway, there's a lot of history there. And so do get involved in those activities, and then we're going to have Memorial Day here. Going to be coming up here very shortly, and whatever.
You mean Veterans Day?
Yeah, Veterans Day. Yes.
We'll say Memorial Day for May.
For May, yeah. So anyway, so there's a lot of things that are going on out there, and so let's do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to basically get Doug to kind of tell us about this particular period, if you will. And talk about the Vietnam Memorial.
Well, Bruce, as you know, there were a group of Vietnam veterans and a mother and father of a Marine killed in Vietnam who went back in November '82 for the National Vietnam Veterans Memorial dedication, and they came back here and decided they were going to do a Oregon Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And I got involved about 2 years after that, and it was done with private money, all contributions, no public money. The city of Portland allowed us to use 11-acre parcel of land near the zoo in Forest Park, just up the hill north of the zoo, for the site, and it is the official State of Oregon Vietnam Veterans Memorial. We raised the money. It was over $1 million to build it. Again, all private money. We dedicated it on November 11, 1987. It honors not just primarily it honors the over 800 Oregonians killed in Vietnam, but it also honors all of those Oregonians who served in Vietnam. We have our program on Memorial Day in May rather than Veterans Day, because we decided at that time, and we've continued it, to have it on Memorial Day because there's so many other wonderful veterans programs and parades on Veterans Day that we didn't want to conflict with that. So we want to have everybody always understand that they're invited not only to that program, is the morning hours of Memorial Day, but also that they it's a park. It's part of the Oregon Portland park system, and it's open 24/7, and it's a beautiful memorial. I've been to a number of memorials that honor Vietnam veterans and those killed in Vietnam, and I'm got a dog in the fight, obviously, but I haven't seen one as beautiful as ours.
Yeah. Even as far as in Washington D.C. up in.
It's a different memorial in Washington.
Memorial, yes, but still.
It's
just
much starker. Ours is
God.
more the Northwest, and it's a circle of life theme. The architect who designed it and supervised the building of it unfortunately died about 2 years ago, but it's just a wonderful presentation, and it makes people, I think, comfortable and at ease when they go through it. But if you go through it, wear your walking shoes, because it's 11 acres, and there's a gradual incline as you walk through the memorial.
I see. I understand that bus service there. You got bus service there, and from the parking lot, I guess.
The parking lot's right at the
Right
front
there,
of
right
the
at the
memorial. It's actually just north and next to the World Forestry Center, and you can take the MAX train, take the zoo exit. You can also, I think there's 2 bus lines that go to the zoo, and there's parking there. Although it can be pretty crowded because of the popularity of the zoo and the Children's Museum.
On the construction, going right back to some of the little nitty-gritty aspect of it. On the construction aspect of it, how did that go about happening? And you talked about that one piece, but
Well, the
some sort of
construction,
supporters.
Oregon general contractors made it their project for 1987, and so we had not just their help, but I mean they became the project managers. They volunteered, their members volunteered not only their expertise but materials, their employees. So that saved us probably half of that $1 million. I mean, that was donation in kind from them. And the construction, it's a bowl, as you know, and there's as you walk through it, you go across the bridge before you get to the various years where it has the names of the Oregonians killed during each of those periods. And I think there's 6 enclaves, and anyway, it had to be excavated, and so that was a major activity in the fall of '86 and the early winter, and so fortunately the rains held off, and we got the bowl excavated. Then we sealed it up for the winter and early spring, and then AGC got back on it, and we had enough money that we'd raised by that time with the help of a Marine Vietnam veteran named Clayton Herring, and you know Clayton, who was very influential in the community, and really did a wonderful job of going to the community leaders and getting donations. Fred Meyer Foundation, or the Meyer Memorial Foundation, was a big help. U.S. Bank at that time was locally owned, was a big help, and there was just a number of other people and organizations that contributed money to the effort. But then we finished it up, and then we were still working on it about 3 o'clock in the morning on November 10th. And again, the rains held, and then about 9 o'clock in the morning, it started to rain, but we still had our dedication at noon.
Wow.
Governor Atiyeh was behind it. Bud Clark, our mayor, was behind it. The city council was behind it. And so I guess they're called commissioners in Portland, but they were behind it. So we had wonderful support from the community, and it's been something that's been for me very satisfying, even these number of years later.
Well, Doug, let's talk a little bit more about veterans today. You were talking about when we were offset from someone that you'd like to.
Well, I want to tell your
story.
audience about a lady named Tina Kennedy.
Okay.
Tina Kennedy, I met her about 2 months ago, and a good friend of mine who's a lawyer and a Vietnam vet told me about her, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. She's a retired Army E8. She came back to to the Milwaukee area where she grew up after she retired, and she wanted to help vets. And so she has an organization called Fort Kennedy, and it's out in the southeast, Portland, Happy Valley, Clackamas area. And she does a number of things for vets and their families on a very, very thin budget. She takes no salary, and I think she, on about $90,000 a year, she's helping with a number of volunteers, vets with their compensation applications to the VA, getting VA medical services. She has her own little food bank, clothes that people donate, and most importantly, she's helping homeless vets find places to live, both temporary and transition, and then also permanently, and helping them with medical problems they might have, or addiction problems. She doesn't discriminate against any vet, and I met with her about a month ago, and she showed me a number of things that she was doing, but in a little over 2 years, she's gotten 258 vets off the street. And I think her success rate in keeping them off the street, and I don't mean she warehouses them any place. I mean, she gets them the services they need, and she also helps with temporary housing. But I think she has about a 90% success rate.
Wow.
She's phenomenal, and I'm going to continue to in any way I can help her, and telling other folks about her. And she likes volunteers, and she likes donations, and she's a 501c3. Actually, it's called Fort Kennedy. It's not her, but it's her charity is a 501c3. So any donations are tax deductible.
All right, I'm gonna bring you in at this point in time. You're the lay person that's here at the end of the day. But the fact of the matter is, do you think that that the American community is actually reaching out to vets? You know, a lot of times you hear people about saying thanks for serving and things of that along that line.
No question about that.
So that's happening.
I've never seen anything except that about vets. Veterans are revered because they keep our nation free. Yeah. So it's. I sometimes think the politicians don't do as well as they should by the vets, and I talk about that in political circles. But as far as veterans are concerned, you can't find Americans who have anything but high respect for them.
You know, and I might throw this out on the table aspect of it. I reach out also too in terms of the No Vets Left Behind, in terms of what I do, and I'm still finding difficulties with vets actually not wanting to go in to get their benefits.
Really?
That's a toughie. Yeah, it's a toughie. And I also I found out that many, I'd say almost 70-80% of the ones that I've met and the ones that I know, all have that PTSD. And PTSD, a lot of times people don't realize that it goes beyond just a wounded person or this, that, and the other. There are other areas, you know, stress, there's family loss, that's huge. That's family. Many of these guys have, when they leave their marriage, when they come back, the divorce and this, that, and the other, and the kids are having problems and on and on and on. So we still have a major problem along that particular line. In fact, we still have a homeless problem, and that's an area that I've been still trying to figure out, where are the numbers? You got me? And just where are these guys?
Is this the reason that so many don't talk about what happened to them? I was amazed. Dennis Richardson and I were close friends. I had to go to his funeral to find out that he had so many medals for bravery in Vietnam. You never hear the veterans talking about their individual experiences, almost never.
I might add on that. When I met Dennis, in fact, you were the one that basically introduced me to Dennis. He wasn't even donning a cover. I always try to tell them to wear that cover, and he was a helicopter pilot, and he's that kind of a guy. I mean, really brave guy, but he would never tell his story.
He wouldn't use it in politics.
No, he wouldn't.
Refused. And I'm not singling out Dennis. I just noticed very few vets will speak of their service.
But again, it's all part of their rehab too. It's part of their rehab, and a lot of times it takes another vet to actually pull them out. you know, to talk about things or some like some of the things that you're doing and you're reaching out along that way, and having these exhibits and whatever. I think that's very, very important. I don't think we do enough of that. We really don't do enough of that to let the people know what they mean when they say thanks for serving. What does that mean, and the impact that it has on the vet. And that's one of the reasons why I try to devote a lot of my time and wear my cover. And, you know, when people come up and say, "Well, thanks for serving," but they recognize the cover, you take the cover off, and then we got to go back into the other arenas and aspects of it. You know what I'm saying? Doug?
Bruce, I think from my standpoint and where we live here in Oregon, we're one of the, probably of the 50 states, we're probably 49 or 50 in terms of military presence. We have recruiters, we have reserve units, we have the Guard, the Air and the Army Guard. But other than that, we don't have any active bases anymore. When you and I came here in the early 70s, well, 1970, there were still a couple active bases, and they've gone away. So the public here maybe isn't quite as aware of the military, not necessarily veterans, but the military. And I think that can be a detriment to veterans' activities. But on the other hand, I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years how the public has honored veterans more than when we first came here. We came here in a time similar to what we're going through politically and culturally now, but there was a real disdain for military veterans, and you and I knew that close up and personal because we were recruiters. That's changed, and I think changed for the good, and I think people are more and more aware of the veterans in our community. The other thing, the one thing that bothers me is a national situation, and that is, I think 1% of the people under 35 years of age are in the military, and then another 1% are their family members, and that's very different from starting with World War II through the Vietnam era, because we had a draft.
Yeah.
And it's those people, I think, feel that they're shut out a little bit. These are particularly the family members when their military man or woman is deployed, and that concerns me more than people now honoring veterans. And I think the VA here does a good job. I think we have a pretty good VA system here, much better than some other places. And I think the new national director of the Veterans Administration, which is now a cabinet position, is working very hard to improve that.
You know, I might want to, let's go back over the draft situation, how it compared then and how it's comparing now, and what about these young men today? You know what I mean?
I think the military we have now is the best we've ever had. I think the people in it are phenomenal. Now, that's because in part they're volunteers, and also because of the budgetary restrictions that the Pentagon has, and there's more money now than there was in the last administration. But nevertheless, they're pretty selective about who they invite into not just the officer ranks, but the enlisted ranks. And I think that makes our military a very strong military.
Well, as you know, I was a guy who was looking for the guys in the cracks, you know what I mean? Because I'd go to court with a lot of the guys for expungement and whatever. And then it made me feel pretty good, because in all due respect, I see some of these guys today, and they've bettered their lives. You know
Oh, yes.
So that was another way out, if you will, to get them back in school and get that education aspect of it, and pick up that responsibility, because our education system in those cases was failing, and because I was recruiting in Southeast and Northeast Portland aspect of it, and that was my job, but you know, we don't have that anymore.
And I think that not only hurts the country in general, but I think it really takes an opportunity away from a lot of kids who are not focused as much as some of their peers, and I think it's an opportunity that they never are able to take advantage of. And just like you, I've talked to people our age and even some younger ones. I talked to a fellow about 50 years of age about 2 weeks ago, and he said how uh, he wasn't breaking any really serious laws, but he was over on the coast as a kid, and he liked cars a lot. And so he was speeding around, and sometimes with a suspended license. And finally, the judge told him, either you're going to jail or you're going into the military. So he liked the young macho guy he was. He joined the Marine Corps, and he said it was the best 4 years of his life. And it also taught him things that his father and mother were trying to teach him, but he never understood till he was in the military.
Right. In fact, I was going to ask you about that because you're sort of the education guy sitting here at the table. And what's your feeling? Are you...
Well, it rings true. You see, they're in a schoolroom or in a homeschool room. The schoolroom is education, but it's discipline. You learn mental discipline, and many students don't learn it. And so if you learn in the real world, it's discipline and self-confidence and ability, even intellectual ability, go together. And discipline and self-confidence is often missing from the classroom, but it's not missing from the military. So it's exactly what he's talking about.
Let's go back to another pretty good point that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about he was crossing that other point. There was another point I was trying to get back to.
Well, I think the country would be better off if there were some sort of national community service obligation that young people had. Not necessarily go in the military, but to do 2 years for your country in some way. And I'll give you an example of a young individual. He's 22 now. Who, when he was 18, he was had no focus, no direction, or little direction and no focus, and his grandparents, who basically raised him the last 5-6 years of his life, got him interested in it, and he went into the Job Corps. And if you remember, my dad was in the CCC, the Youth Conservation Corps, in the 30s. And because Roosevelt knew that he had to put these young folks to work, and because they didn't have jobs, and also there were things that needed to be done in this country. And that really helped my dad. He actually went in when he was 16, and the current Job Corps, which Kennedy I think started, is very similar to that. From what I've learned now from this young man who now is 22, he completed 3 apprenticeships, and he's working for a very successful organization or a business here, and he's making. This is starting. He just finished Job Corps about 6 months ago, and he's making $28 an hour plus benefits plus retirement.
Oh, gee. Oh.
And he likes what he's doing.
Oh, gee.
And he's so focused, it's unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
It's just it's like he's gone from maturity of about a 14-year-old when he was 18 to now at 22 he has the maturity of a 40-year-old guy. It's just unbelievable. So that there's benefits both ways on that, Bruce, and I just see that being something that more young people I wish were required to take advantage of that.
Well, during my time back down south in Houston, that's where I grew up. So in that area, we had ROTC for the first time.
In high school?
In high school, and that was kind of an interesting piece.
Was that mandatory at your high school?
It was mandatory. No, it was voluntary.
Yeah. See, in my high school in Detroit, Michigan, it was voluntary also.
And I thought it was kind of, so when I came here, I had all of these things besides being in the Corps and being around the military and this, that, and the other. But then here in the Portland metropolitan, it was just, we fought the situation down at Portland Public Schools. I think Answer did some of the things down at Portland State and whatever. But it wasn't receptive. We came close, but we weren't able to get it in there.
You're never going to have a military presence in the Portland Public Schools. That's just the reality of the political culture here. Now, Oregon City has an Army ROTC unit in their high school, and Reynolds might. I'm not sure about Reynolds, but and then there's one down in the valley. I think Albany, one of the Albany high schools has it. But there should be more of them because they're volunteer.
Well, you know, but as you think about that, when people, the kinds of public monies that are spent within a kind of a so-called poverty area, with the bulk of that money going there, you would think that education would be something that would be somewhat of a priority. You know what I'm saying?
But there are people in our community who don't look at the military as an educational opportunity.
And it was one.
Oh, it still is. It's phenomenal.
It was awesome. It was just awesome. I mean, when I think about the whole issue with firearms and things of that nature, I mean, we had to go through that whole process of learning what
Every
those weapons
Marine's a
were.
rifleman.
And went through that in ROTC. We were assigned M1s and tearing them down and up and this, that, and the other. And we had our own 22s and this, that. We had matches all over the place throughout the city school system, and we had march. I mean, it was just a fabulous kind of, and it was a motivator, if you will, to actually get into these other studies and whatever, because most of the kids didn't have the family backgrounds, if you will, in those various kinds of jobs to do that. That kind of thing.
And remember also the land grant schools, yes. Oregon State, Washington State, Michigan State, were assisted financially by the federal government starting back in the mid 1850s, I believe, or the mid 1800s. And continued until about 30 years ago. And the requirement was that male students who were physically healthy had to drill, and they could pick their service depending on which school they were in. But the Army was in every one of those land grant schools, and for the first 2 years they had to wear a uniform and drill, I think, 2 hours a day on Wednesday afternoon. So that was right along with it.
Yeah. Any comments on that there, Art? What do you think?
No, I certainly agree. It's a great way to learn about the real world and to learn about working with other people. And as I said, confidence and discipline. That's what I see missing in so many homes that try to educate their kids. Because education is mathematics and reading and writing, but there's a lot more than that. And training a mind is a complicated thing, and the things that the military helps to train you in are not available anywhere else. They can be if you happen to have just the right role models and older people around you, but most young people don't have those, and the military provides them.
And well, now the big thing now for veterans is actually the medical side of it right now, big time. From the standpoint of getting it.
Well, in that regard, maybe some of your listeners. Viewers aren't aware that the VA finally said, I think the Congress passed a law that said the blue water, Vietnam veterans, the ones that guys are on ships, because of the Agent Orange stuff coming back to the ships or going from the ships to the in-country, they're now eligible for Agent Orange benefits, which is that should have been done years ago, but at least they have it now.
And also included in that also too, they've added a couple of would it be as a result of Agent Orange and things that medical kinds of conditions?
Yes,
they've added them on the list.
They have.
So for those who were in NAM and basically were denied, if you will, that status, they can go back and get their exam and possibly qualify and get into that peace aspect of it, which was really good. Okay. Let's see what other activities are involved in the.
Well, you're coming to lunch honoring the Marine Corps on Wednesday, but today's the Marine Corps' birthday, and before we went on camera, I said happy birthday.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. In fact, I'm supposed
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi, big time, and I'll be going to the Marine Corps Ball by the weekend. I got the unit out, the reserve unit, the Marine Corps. They have that normal ball aspect of it, and you'd be surprised to see all of the young folks all dressed up in
They're
uniforms.
wonderful. I have so much respect for the young people nowadays who are in the military because there's no draft.
No draft.
And they volunteered, and they're serving their country, and I just think the world of them for doing that.
Yes. And again, going back to the Corps, a lot of the old timers, going to all be there, dressed up and sitting around and as we get through telling our stories.
Well, they're also a reservoir of common sense.
Yes.
throughout their ages.
Yes, very much so.
A reservoir of common sense that we seem desperately to need.
Very conservative kind of guys, but fun,
Yes.
fun wise, huh?
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons why I enjoy going down to the Blue Water event. I'm gonna call you the Blue Water down. When I go to that luncheon, I'm gonna stand up and introduce myself. Well, thank you guys, but it was nice the fact that the Navy here they put well, Doug, I give Doug a lot of credit for that piece because he really gets the guys out there, and he's a lot of these
Well,
guys are pilots.
A lot of people maybe don't know that the Navy and Marine Corps are one team.
That's right. That's
And
right.
then the military, Coast Guard, Air Force, and Army, and Navy and Marine Corps are all working much closer together than they did in previous generations, which is not only necessary, but it makes our operations a lot more successful.
I always get a better conversation when I inject the fact, because sometimes my memory goes, and then I'll share with the Navy that they are departments of the Marine Corps,
I see.
and some of them react, some don't, but I don't know what.
Well, the guys have a sense of humor. No, it's not true.
Is that what it is? But that relationship was in there for years.
Yes.
Years and years and
Yes,
years.
well, since the Marine Corps actually was established by Congress before the Navy was established by Congress.
Isn't that something?
I think 2 years.
Wow.
1770s,
Wow.
the early 1780s.
Started out as a guard.
That's right.
Started out as a guard.
The
Isn't
sea
that something? Yeah.
soldiers, the Marine
Yep.
Corps,
Yep.
stood up in the riggings of
Yeah.
the sailing ships and shot everybody but other Marines,
Exactly.
including some Navy guys. I think.
Exactly. I mean, it's really something. Towns, Tavern. I mean, it's a very, very interesting stories. Let's put it that way. And like you said, these various balls and activities we have, like you're having at this luncheon situation for the Marine Corps and whatever. All the guys just sitting around the table telling their stories, and very prominent guys too. Very prominent,
Yes.
very successful in their lives and whatever, and still contributing.
And every one of them, to a man, would tell you that they owe their success in a great part to having served in the military.
And then, like I said, and the other thing is that there are many organizations that are still contributing very highly. VFW is a good one. Veterans of Foreign Wars, and a person can join if you had but you can also join if you hadn't gone in. In some cases, American Legion. You got a number of organizations, and then you've got a lot of times people get this little they don't really understand about the Buffalo Soldier. But the Buffalo Soldier.
Well, they ought to learn. The public ought to learn about
Yeah,
it.
what that issue is all about. It actually was when Lincoln allowed blacks, the slaves, if you will, to get into the army. Was it the blue? What I'm thinking about
During the Civil War.
yeah, during the Civil War. And in fact, in all due respect, African Americans fought in the initial war. Remember the first war against the British. They were
Yes.
folks that fought in that particular war aspect of it. And then when we got into the Civil War aspect of it, they fought in that war. But they were just soldiers because everybody was part and parcel of it. We had the American flag on one side, then there were blacks that fought on the Confederacy side. See?
Yes.
Yeah, there were blacks that fought in that. So blacks have always participated in all of the wars in this country. But a lot of times people tend to forget that history. And a lot of times I tend to blame that in all due respect, on our educational system. See, that should be a part of our education system, which I think would have helped quite immensely on the whole issue of assimilation, which we are still having a little problem trying to get to that point that we don't necessarily, because like I said, the Buffalo Soldiers, when people look at the uniform, it's as if like it's an organization. No, it's not. It's part of our defense mechanism. They were the Army at the time. They were Army. They were the Army. Yeah, but then as time goes, and then all of a sudden they say, well, the Buffalo, and then all of a sudden you get the other story about the Indians. Said, well, gee whiz, when the military were guarding the posts, I guess these water holes and whatever, when folks were coming into the Pacific Northwest, the Indians saw them and said, oh wow, they revered the buffalo, and And these guys were pretty tough fighters. You
And
know.
they were black like
And
the
they were
buffalo.
black like a buffalo. They say, well, gee whiz. And these guys, these some tough dudes. In fact, we still have issues today with it, but in the with some of the Native Americans at times, because you know, but it's getting together. You know, folks are kind of.
Isn't there a group here who commemorates the Buffalo Soldiers by
Oh yeah.
riding and
Oh yeah.
and
Oh
during
yeah. Oh yeah.
certain
Yeah.
ceremonies?
I was
and places?
president. I was president of the unit for about 4 years.
You were
Yeah,
actually on a
I was
horse,
president.
Bruce?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you know, I grew up on a farm, so I.
Well, I thought you grew up in New Orleans.
Oh no, no. Well, Louisiana.
Yeah.
We very rarely go up there after you get through. You had to get through plowing that field and doing a whole bunch of this thing and.
So you were comfortable on a horse as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had no problem. In fact, I still remember my horse I had. His name was Dutch. What a horse. We race and you know all kinds of good stuff or whatever. So I had my opportunity to.
Well, the group here who honors them are they still active?
They're still active. They're
Good.
still very, very much active, and they participate. In fact, there's going to be a parade. There's the Hollywood parade, and they'll probably,
Tomorrow.
They'll be there tomorrow, and I'll be with the VFW, sitting on a 6x, you know, and
But not on a horse.
no, but
Not anymore, huh?
But I will be in my Buffalo soldier uniform, my soldier uniform.
Good.
On the back of that 6x. And the folks are going to be saying, well, gee, what's he doing with that uniform on there? Was that the Buffalo? I said, no, it's a soldier. I'm just trying to get the history on the table so people will start talking about it. Why not? 'Cause we definitely need to do more of that, and I think that's a good thing to do. But no, they're there, and there's the National Black Veterans Association. They spend quite a bit of time helping veterans get their benefits
Good.
and things of that nature aspect of it. And then I help them because I'm reaching out myself for benefits, but naturally, I'm sort of sensitive about the assimilation aspect of it, and so sometimes people get a little trouble about whenever we say National Black Association, as opposed any veteran can walk in that door and get benefits, and so naturally, I just take the other side in, and so we're improving the application process and talking to the assimilation aspect of it, that piece, and it works well. But they're doing real good. In fact, they're recognized as having given more benefits to veterans across the board, not only blacks but just veterans across the board than any organization in the country. Yep, like $20 million or something like that. They've done that to date.
That's not small change.
And that's not small change. They've been getting their benefits, and they're doing with a guy by the name of Nathaniel Hirsch, and he's quite a guy. He's all over the place, and he's working very, very hard and whatever. And that's another area that we're working very closely on. Another thing that I'm doing now is that and we'll be getting other vets involved, is that bring the flag back to the table. And a lot of times in these government meetings and whatever, we all start off with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And sometimes that's a little hard for some folks, but when you walk in there with your uniform and your cover on and whatever, and tell everybody to stand up, because now we're going to do the pledge. And for those of us who don't feel comfortable with that, please excuse yourself until we get through doing the pledge. But the whole idea is just to educate folks, to bring it back to the table, because we've got to do that now. We may have a divide, but this is still the most beautiful country in the world, for that matter. It just matters, they just need to know, come back to the definition. We know what it meant. And some of that stuff, in some cases, pluses and minuses, but we all live in a plus and minus. We're that kind of a society. But the fact of the matter is, we are together, and that flag is that unifying entity. It's not about just the immigrant flag. We got all kinds of flags here now. In fact, that was the whole deal. We had a whole melting pot, and that was one of the reasons why we were doing that flag every morning, because it was one flag.
You know, while you're saying that, I'm trying to remember whether I've ever been to a meeting that didn't start that way. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I have, which kind of tells you something about my politics rather than. I think
Well, Art, unfortunately, there's a lot of public meetings now, particularly on the West Coast
Yeah,
in the
I
metropolitan
know.
areas that don't start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I just don't have to go to them.
And in all due respect, that's the other thing that causes the divide in our politics today, so to speak.
It's
You know what I'm saying?
sort of a bad way to make a political statement. I think.
Yeah. So anyways, that's something I'm working on. It's like part of what I like to do anyway as a recruiter. just putting the issue back to the table. And I might add that I've been starting it up at the county here, and they're doing well.
Good.
I'm having to go down there on Wednesdays, and you'll probably see my smiling face up there on Wednesday morning, first thing. I try to get up there the first one, and then tell everybody to stand up, and you know, it's interesting. People stand up,
Good.
and they do it, you know. And hopefully I'll get the commissioners to take the lead. Each of them can do it a month at a time, and then they can start it up. But I still have to watch them.
You have the commissioners' meetings and things, there's a debate about whether you do this or they don't.
Well, you know, you only have 3 minutes. You get that in, and then naturally I get as much as I can in
No,
that
I
3
was
minutes.
talking about how they start their meetings. Are they starting the meetings this way or not?
Well, yeah, well,
Portland meetings.
yeah, with my support.
Public meetings.
With my support.
I see you have
As
to
soon as
kind
I
of
can get
force it.
them to
Okay.
maybe do a proclamation of something or whatever, and make it somewhat policy, and I'm feeling good, you know. And then I think everybody else will feel good, and so I'm looking forward. Then I've got to work on the city. I got to work on the city. I'll just keep it that way. I was pretty straight up Marine kind of a guy, and most of those folks are still on OJT. Yeah, so that's another.
Well,
that's
they're not
another-
as old as we are.
Yeah, no. And this is community television, you know. But this is old school, you know. We come from a different time, different era, and there's a lot of
That's
respect.
true whether
yeah.
you're in the military or
Th-
not.
that's right.
We
Yeah,
come from a
just-
different
yeah.
time and place.
Just time and place aspect of it, and I'd swear by the Corps. See, that's just part of what I've been exposed to, because we're all creatures of our exposure
And our experiences.
and experiences. That's really where it's all about, and so it's always good to share. As I use that old.
Well, you do a lot of good work in that regard, Bruce.
Well, thank you also too.
Well-
When I think about our days as recruiters and whatever, and the guys that were there, and you know, like I say, Answer and Judd, and who else was there?
There are a number of
Some of the other
guys. A guy who stayed in the Marine Corps named Pat Kaler, retired as a colonel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember Pat. You remember those tours were 2 years
Yes.
in duration,
Right.
so
Right.
you didn't get burned out and
No,
didn't get too
no.
comfortable in the civilian world.
Yeah. And I've stayed around.
Me too. Me too.
Well, we're getting pretty good, guys. We got about 15 more minutes here, and I tell you what we might do, if it's okay with you, Doug. We got a guy here from Southern Oregon here, and
I know.
he's running for office up in that area.
It's a biennial activity.
That's right. And so we got about 15 minutes. What we might want to do, we might get some ideas of what's going on in your area, and what are some of the major issues that are facing your constituency in that area. You got.
Most of it is just to get the government off their backs. That's what you hear everywhere. If you go in a city and you talk to the merchants, if the economy of the city is doing well, they're happy. They don't want to change, regardless of what the political aspect. But the southern half of Oregon, they're not doing so well. So if you go door to door in the main streets in those towns, you go into the store and the proprietor's in there, and you say, he says, Mark Robinson, I'm running for office, and he says, well, what are you going to do for me? And I say, well, I'm going to get the government off your back. Then you don't have to talk anymore. He just starts talking. Just listen. They all have the same problem. In every regard, the lack of the suppression of free enterprise is the main thing throughout our region. And then you can talk about the logging industry. You can talk about all the specific problems. But really, the founders gave us a government, the republic, that was supposed to have a minimal government and maximum freedom. And we've been trying to protect that ever since. The way I put it is, we now have to protect our constitutional republic on a very uneven and unprincipled battlefield, but that's the only one we're offered. It's not a military battlefield for the most part, but it's the same problem.
What about homelessness in your area?
We
what about
don't
that
have
issue?
very much of it down in Josephine County and in District 4. You see a little bit up in the cities in Eugene and Corvallis. You see more. It is a problem. People not only have to live that way, but some of them just sort of succumb to it, and that may speak also for the question of freedom. one way or another, they've given up hope, and that's not good.
How about veterans in your area?
Well, there are a lot of veterans in our area, and
Okay.
they're highly respected. And
Are they
many,
retirees more out of a?
well, I don't know whether that's true.
Retirees,
We still have a lot of young people in the military.
Okay.
No, they're throughout many of the most successful, respected people in communities. I don't often even know about their military service, but that's the whole region shot through with them. It's quite clear to me that if that they succeed more, probably because of the things you were talking about. There are other ways to do it, but the military is open to everyone and works. Sometimes you have the good fortune to have special mentors, special opportunities, which give you the same skills, people skills and personal skills that the military does. But those opportunities are relatively rare, and they're offered to everyone that goes into the military. So I'm sorry when we have to have wars and fighting, but otherwise it's even a very powerful and strong social force.
And it's despite like any system and any culture, it has its flaws. It's a system, as you and I know, of merit, and it's always been that way, more or less. Particularly since World War II, when the greatest generation contributed so much, not just in their efforts, but in their numbers. And they came back with an attitude that they can accomplish things, and which they did after World War II. But it also created a culture where it started all of the interactions that we didn't have in the past. From agrarian to urban and black and white and American Indians and Hispanic Americans, and then it took a while with the male and female. But the military has always been a social lab, and some of that's not so good, but most of it is, I think, a benefit to this country, that people come out of their experience in the military probably a little more tolerant, broader knowledge of not just technical subjects, but also social interaction. And I think that benefits our society. And like I said, it's unfortunate that there's only about a total of 2% of our population now that experiences that those activities that have that experience.
Art, any comments on that?
I don't have anything to add. You're absolutely right. It's a dangerous world, so it's good they're there, and they're very good for they're a very good social institution. Nobody can challenge that.
When I think about Southern Oregon, I think about the other issue the issue with reference to drugs around the country,
well,
and that's why.
But you see, if you lose hope, whether you lose self-confidence, if you lose ability, if you lose hope, that means you're more likely to gravitate toward these things. But drugs are a serious problem. I read that recently that about 8 million of our youth are heavy users of marijuana, and the government is promoting it to get the taxes. It's not good, even though that's a lightweight drug. Playing chemically with your mind of a human being is not wise in any circumstances. And of course, we have a drug culture down there. I don't know whether they're greater users, but they're busy making the stuff. Every time I see a marijuana offense go up, it's a little depressing, and every time I see one go down, I'm a little elated. Lately, I think their products are going down in price, so we're seeing fewer go up and more go down. But then there's private property. People can do what they want on their land as long as they don't harm others. But the ethics, and most of I spent a lot of time reading history, and an awful lot of the men and women you can quote from history who were articulate in expressing our values learned their values in the military in a much tougher time than this. It's become more technological. That's why I was able to work on nuclear civil defense and strategic defense, but I never served in the military. And there are different ways to work, but the ethic that an individual learns as a member of the military is irreplaceable. And some of the men, especially men, I have 6 children that grew up without their mother, and the men that influenced them the most were, I'd say, at least half of them were very strong military men in the military, particularly a Marine background.
Well, look, guys, we got about 5 more minutes or so. I'm open for any discussion you guys might want to share at this point in time. But again, like I said, this is the veteran time right now. We're just trying to acknowledge the fact that they're out there, and we're reaching out to them and letting the those non-veterans, if you will, that are acknowledging the fact that they've actually provided a service, if you will, to this country, and that's kind of like where we are now. And I will say that the benefits that veterans are getting as far as medical and whatever, they're just outstanding. They can receive those benefits outside of the VA now. That's huge. You can pick your own doctor with no problem. I thought that was a very interesting piece. A lot of them still don't know, and they can use that service aspect of it. They could tighten up. Maybe they might tighten up a little bit as far as the inside version aspect of it, and as I say, pay those people more so you can still access that one-stop system, because we have probably one of the best heart situations up here on the hill.
Yes.
It's awesome, the things that they do, and that's,
Well, I think in this part of the country, I don't know about other parts, but I know a little bit about Seattle and then a lot about the VA here. I think they've always been willing to work with the specialists in the medical fields in the civilian hospitals and clinics. The example here is OHSU is just I call it the tunnel in the sky, but you can walk right over to it. But for years, they've utilized doctors and medical students and even some nurses in some medical fields at the VA hospital. I think Seattle does the same thing. I grew up in Detroit. I know Detroit does it because the Detroit Medical Center, which is similar to OHSU, is right next door to a fabulous VA hospital in downtown Detroit. And it's just, you would be amazed at that hospital. I was there. I gave myself a little tour of it in September when I was back in Detroit. And it's state of the art. It's much bigger than our facility. In the lobby of the hospital, the VA hospital, is like an atrium. They have stores of different, not just a convenience store, but they have restaurants in the hospital. They have a sporting goods store, and no, I mean it's Bruce. My eyes were wide open, and it was. I would guess that the building is less than 10 years old. Now they're going to do a major remodel on this building here, and it's really easy to get to. They don't have the hills that we have.
Yeah, right.
They look at our hills and call them mountains. And we look at the mountains and say those are mountains, not driving up to the VA hospital.
Right.
I was observant, and it appeared to me that, and I talked to a couple of people afterwards who knew about it, and they said they're getting very good care there too. So, but I would say to you, and answer your question, I would say 2 things to people who are interested, to your viewers who are interested in learning more about the military and veterans. Talk to those men and women in your family who have served in the military, because like we know that military veterans are more open with other military veterans, but talk to your relatives and your friends and say, hey, what did you do? When did you do it? How'd you do it? What'd you think about it? And so that you understand not just the history of it, but who that person is. And then I would also say the second thing is, if you want to get involved, there's all kinds of
Oh, yes.
places you can volunteer. You can volunteer at the VA hospital. You can help Tina Kennedy out at Fort Kennedy.
Yes.
I mean, those are just two of hundreds. You can go to the VFW hall
Yep.
near in your neighborhood and say,
right.
hey, how can I help here?
That's right.
And then there's a wonderful program at Reynolds High School honoring vets. They just had it about 2 weeks ago when a coach and gym teacher in Milwaukee High School started that about 25 years ago. And for the vets who maybe are feeling a little displaced or want a little and deserve a little recognition, they can contact Reynolds High School, and the principal there is 100% behind it, and they'll tell them the date next year when they call it Honoring America's Heroes. And that a guy named Ken Buckles was the coach and teacher at Milwaukee High School that started it there. Now it's at Reynolds.
Okay, good. Well, about at that point in time, I'll probably add the fact there's all sorts of parades tomorrow.
Yes.
There's going to be a big
And go
one
to
there.
those.
Yeah, go to those parades. You can talk to people. You see those vets all over the place, and you'd be surprised. Some of them are sitting there in those uniforms. Some of them are fit, and some of them are not. But they're very
Doesn't
proud.
matter. They all served.
They all serve. They all serve.
I'm going down to Parade in Roseburg and hand out Trump signs.
Okay, all right. Well, that's you got to do what you have to do. All right, you got to do what you have to do. And like I said, this has been great, guys. This has really been
Well,
great.
Bruce,
Really
thanks for inviting me.
We appreciate you guys coming here at this point in time, and we do this as a service to our community. And like you indicated, hey, talk to the vet, say hi to them. They really appreciate the fact that when you shake.
Thank you. My pleasure. My
keep
pleasure.
this
Good luck.
Appreciate you.
You got it.
Enjoy the parade in Roseburg.
Yeah,
That's
gonna,
easy. I like those parades.
Yeah,
Great.
that's going to be a real good one. That's going to be a real good one. Huh?
Yeah, well, I've had more fun, lately. Starting in 2 years ago, I just go down the road with a pickup of Trump signs, and it's empty at the end.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you have the
Good.
most fun. Also, everybody you give us wants one of those signs has a strong handshake.
Good.
Usually they're men that do things with.
Okay. Well,
Okay, thank you.
Just
Thank you. I'll
hold on.
see you.
Just hold on. Well, you got to go. Yeah, you got to go. Mark, he's got to get back on over the other hill there, right?
Huh?
You got to get over that hill.
Well, I'm just driving home this evening.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Have a
Well, anyway.
safe drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good enough. Good
Bruce,
enough.
thanks for having me.
Well, this is going to be
See
good.
you Wednesday.
And thanks very much. Okay.
Well-
Good. All right, guys. Again,
Okay.
thanks again, bud. Appreciate it
you.
very much. And folks, for you viewers out there, like I indicated before, reach out to the vet and say hi to them, and like the guests have said, basically talk to them. Like maybe a little difficult to start with, but once they get in there, maybe you can mention something about what's that heavy movie aspect of it? What's that one that Spielberg did? The veteran movie.
Saving Private Ryan.
Ryan is a good one, and what was that other one? The one with
Platoon?
Denzel Washington.
That was about the Civil War. The
The
Black
Civil War.
soldiers.
The Civil War. That was a good
From
one. That was a good one.
Massachusetts.
It was a good one. Well, anyway, we're done anyway. That's a good deal. So
Did I
thanks
get-
very much. Have a good one. See you next week.
I thought we were off. I wouldn't have mentioned the
No,
Trump
that's
sign.
okay. That's okay. This is
I thought
community,
we were
this is
done
community
before I
television.
made that comment.
No, this is community television. He's
Okay.
commander in chief. We know what that's all about.
Yes.
Yeah.